warm welcome to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. You're watching the Russian invasion of Ukraine, our coverage of it, that is. Here are the headlines. Russia declares expanded war goals beyond Ukraine's Donbas region. Ukraine's First Lady, Olena Zelensky, appeals to U.S. Congress for air defense systems. And the United Nations warns that funding to meet key development goals by 2030 might be neglected by Western donor nations supporting Ukraine. Well, welcome again. Russia appears to be pushing further any hopes for peace with Ukraine, as Foreign Secretary, or Foreign Minister, beg your pardon, Sergei Lavrov, says it makes no sense to resume talks with Kyiv at the moment. He was making the comments in an interview on Wednesday when asked, do the peace talks make any sense, any of it, or is it just a diplomatic decorum just for the sake of it? Mr. Lavrov said, denazification, demilitarization in a sense that there are no military threats to our safety from the territory of Ukraine, this task remains. When the negotiators met in Istanbul, one sort of geography was discussed. Our willingness to accept the Ukrainian proposal was based on that geography, the geography of the end of March 2022. So to say now the geography is different, it's far from being just the DPR and LPR. It's also Kherson and Zaporizhia regions and a number of other territories, and the process is continuing. It further explains that as the West pours more and more long-range weapons, such as HIMARS, into Ukraine in an impotent rage or in a desire to exacerbate the situation as much as possible, these HIMARS, Ukraine's Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov or someone else was boasting that they have already received 300-kilometer ammo as well, means that the geographical task of the special operation will extend still further from the current line because, as he said, we cannot allow the part of Ukraine that will be controlled by Zelensky or whoever replaces him to contain weapons that will pose a threat to our territory and the territory of the republics that have declared independence, those that want to determine their own future.
Denazification, demilitarization in a sense that there are no military threats to our society from the territory of Ukraine. This task remains. When the negotiators met in Istanbul, one sort of geography was discussed. Our willingness to accept the Ukrainian proposal was based on that geography, the geography of the end of March 2022. As the West pours more and more long-range weapons such as HIMARS into Ukraine in an impotent rage or in a desire to exacerbate the situation as much as possible, these HIMARS, Ukraine's Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov, someone else was boasting that they have already received 300 km armor. Well, that means the geographical task of the special operation will extend still further from the current line, because we cannot allow the part of Ukraine that will be controlled by Zelensky or whoever replaces him to contain weapons that will pose a direct threat to our territory and the territory of the republics that have declared independence, those that want to determine their own future.
Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department says Russia's expanded military focus in Ukraine to annex parts of the country beyond the eastern Donbas region is what the Biden administration has been warning about. State Department spokesperson Ned Price was addressing a press conference on Wednesday, where he said for Russia, the war is more of a territorial conquest.
It was just yesterday that we warned in no uncertain terms of Russia's plans to annex additional Ukrainian territory, and that the Russian government is reviewing detailed plans to purportedly annex a number of regions inside Ukraine, including Kherson and Zaporizhia. And now that that invasion is well underway, now that that invasion has proven itself to the world to be nothing more than a war of territorial conquest, a war of territorial aggression, the likes of which we haven't seen since mid last century, it is no surprise that Foreign Minister Lavrov and others continue to try to put the blame on the West.
In a related development, chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, says Ukraine's eastern Donbass region has not yet been lost to the Russians. He was responding to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's claims that Moscow's military tasks in Ukraine go beyond the eastern Donbass region. After meeting earlier with some 50 countries virtually of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said at the same press briefing with General Milley that Lavrov's comments appear to be aimed at the Russian population. The West has supplied Ukraine with longer-range heavy artillery and multiple launch rocket systems, so it can hold despite Russian artillery supremacy in numbers and ammunition. General Milley said Ukraine had used high-mobility artillery rocket systems to hit Russian command and control nodes, logistic network, and air defense sites within Ukraine. While the United States says, which is where Ukraine's First Lady Olena Zelensky is right now, she appealed to lawmakers on Wednesday to provide more help for her country as it struggles against the 5-month Russian invasion, saying weapons could help assure victory. During her address to U.S. Congress, Zelensky showed videos of children she said had been wounded or killed, including a 3-year-old boy, now in Germany, learning how to use prosthetic limbs. The Biden administration says the U.S. has provided $8 billion in security assistance to Ukraine since the war began, including $2.2 billion in the last month. The United States is also warning Russian ally Iran. It risks dependence on Russia after Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei called for long-term cooperation with Moscow during his meeting with President Putin on Tuesday. Tehran had earlier tried to show its neutrality by abstaining from a key UN vote on condemning Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. State Department spokesperson Ned Price once again addressed the issue on Wednesday, telling reporters Iran now casts its lot with a small number of countries who wore that veil of neutrality only to end up supporting President Putin in his war against Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. Despite the U.S. criticism of Iran's summit, CIA Chief Bill Burns, who as a diplomat helped broker the U.S.-Iran nuclear deal and served as ambassador to Moscow, said Iran and Russia were reaching out to each other primarily because they are both looking to break out of political isolation and are under sanctions. Back in Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky says the 7th round of European sanctions against Russia are inadequate. He wants Russia to feel a much higher price for the war to force it to seek peace. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen accused Russia of blackmailing the European Union over energy as she unveiled a plan on Wednesday to slash gas demand in the bloc ahead of a feared cut-off of deliveries by Russia as winter approaches. President of the UN Economic and Social Council, Colin Kellepeel, is warning that the COVID-19 pandemic, climate change and the war in Ukraine have led to an unprecedented reversal of decades of progress in combating global poverty and hunger and ensuring quality education for children everywhere. Kellepeel says there is growing concern that funding for critical UN development goals, including ending extreme poverty and hunger by 2030, might be neglected by Western donor nations supporting Ukraine militarily and financially in its war against Russia. During an interview with the Associated Press, he said, "Please let's not forget other pre-existing challenges. We need to finance development, we need to finance climate, we need to finance many other conflicts around the world. Making a mistake and sidelining these issues," Kellepeel warns, could lead to higher costs in the future if they escalate because there is no longer attention to them. Well, more from the CIA chief, Bill Burns, who's saying Russia's President Vladimir Putin's goal is to restore Russia to its former status as a great power. Burns himself, a Russian speaker who served as ambassador to Moscow early in Putin's tenure, and noting that he's dealt with Putin for more than 2 decades, described the Russian leader as having a very combustible mix of grievance and ambition and insecurity. He said Putin is not a big believer in the better angels of the human spirit. He's convinced that his destiny as Russia's leader is to restore Russia as a great power. Asked about periodic media reports suggesting Putin is ill, Burns retorted, there are lots of rumors about President Putin's health, and as far as we can tell, he's apparently too healthy. And the United States estimates Russia has suffered some significant losses in the war, especially on casualties. Bill Burns, again, speaking on the matter, says Russian casualties in Ukraine have so far reached about 15,000 killed and perhaps 45,000 wounded, cautioning that Kyiv has endured significant losses as well. He says the Ukrainians have suffered as well, less than that, of course, but also significant. I want to bring in clinical psychologist at the Lagos University Teaching Hospital, Juliet Otto, to talk to us about the mental and emotional awareness of this war. Dr. Otto, thank you for making time to be with me this morning.
Good morning, Amara. It's a pleasure. Good morning, Nigeria.
At the start of this war, the concern was the number of people being displaced, the refugee situation at the border, how many people were displaced, having nowhere to go, but needing to go because they could die, they stayed. We'd also discussed mental health of these refugees. And now for those left in Ukraine, many are hearing, these rocket missiles hitting residential buildings. No one knows who's next. They're also watching neighbors and friends die around them. How do you think that these images impact on the people still living in these war zones?
Okay. The mental health of adolescents, we must take into cognizance, most especially the mental health of adolescents and young adults, which are at risk during this Ukraine and Russia invasion war. The individuals who are affected by this high risk of mental health complications, these are mainly the adolescents and young adults. And some of this, they could come up with a risk of mental health complications, including PTSD, anxiety, and depression. There are many affected by this war because some of majority of those children, they've seen damages, like you had said, damages of their properties, valuable assets, death of close family members. Some families are being displaced, I beg your pardon, and because, especially for the Ukrainians, they were not mentally prepared. They didn't have a mental preparedness for this disaster. And for the young adolescents, they'll have a negative view of coping skills, which they may resort to using some of those psychoactive substances, which are likely to adversely affect their mental health. It could be even those the combat and the non-combat, which are civilians and soldiers. So nobody is immune. The way in which they embrace those stress reactions to some of these will lead to other psychological symptoms that are commonly available after any war.
No, please go on. Please go on.
Okay. And some of the psychological impact will have massive concerns. We are mainly concerned with the individuals that are still left in those communities because it is to affect the way they reason, and some of them will begin to have flashback, daytime dreams, and adolescents, because they are adolescents, they are unable to communicate some of those things, they bottle them up, and they grow up into, it becomes a generational PTSD for them, post-traumatic stress disorder for them. So it's important that at those moments, those that are still there, that are displaced, I think it's high time that they are being brought together, try to educate them, and begin to give them support so that they don't actually feel to having more of mental breakdown.
Yeah, Juliet, I think something's wrong with my earpiece. I could hardly hear, the last few things that you said. But no one ever considers the mental health of the leaders who are strategizing and making the decisions, in this war. For instance, President Zelensky himself, who's been making videos every night since this war, assuring his people, trying to tell them that things will be, that they're winning the war, and also addressing, different world leaders around the world and addressing different bodies and different fora. What are you reading from his body language, his tone, and from your professional experience, what could he be going through mentally?
Okay. For any war of choice, the leaders who are involved, they've weighed up their potential for losses and gain. And for Putin, I think cognitive psychology tells us that human subjects are loss averse. Putin's decision-making, however, seems to undermine this theory. For him, he is not saying that he's going to make losses. He's seeing himself that he's going to make so much progress, that is going to yield so much progress for Russia. For Putin, he saw Russia as an inauthentic and imperial state. And that's a distorted version that he had of Ukraine. The invasion of Russia and Ukraine, it will cost many lives, which it's already doing, and it will inflict, like I said at the beginning, it will inflict traumas on both countries, not just the Ukrainians alone, but also the Russians. So he should not be oblivious of that. And he's just, for the kind of behavior he's putting up psychologically, one would look at him as one that has a racist personality. He's a trait, though, because it has not been diagnosed to say he has a racist, narcissistic personality disorder. For him, he has a troubled, it's already been known that he has a troubled relationship with other countries of the world. And he's trying to shield himself from the isolation and sanctions that has already been imposed on Russia. He's trying to feel as if those sanctions are not hitting him. Because of that high level of hostility and lack of empathy, he's trying to shield himself from all of that, thinking, oh, it's trying to pose to the world that he's not being affected. But I'm sure deep down in him, he's being affected because he was believing he was a superior and he was belittling Ukraine. But from the look of things, the countries of the world tend to be supporting Ukraine, and that is actually taking a toll on Russia.
You're talking about the Russian President Vladimir Putin, right? Because I'd asked about
yes.
I'd asked about
Yes.
Zelensky, the Ukrainian president. Russia seems to be getting the upper hand in this war, and Ukraine has been begging for weapons, all of this time. Once again, about President Zelensky, what do you think he's thinking? What do you think he's going through mentally as this war progresses?
For him, he never envisaged that something like this was going to come up and it was going to escalate to this point. Maybe the preparedness wasn't there mentally. So he's trying to, for him, he didn't see all of this coming. So he will be going through some stress reaction, which are not open to the public. But I would think for him now, he needs to seek psychological evaluation for emotional stability, because he may not be emotionally stable for now, seeing all of these that are happening.
What could be the effects of going through long periods of conflict? What kind of, reactions are exhibited when someone has gone through a war like the one going on in Ukraine?
It's mainly traumatic, especially for those, like I said at the beginning, combat and not combat. It's the traumatic experiences from a psychological point of view. Some of them will develop PTSD possibly. Some will develop other mental health condition, anxiety, and depression. So it's important that at this moment that some of those things are being looked into and quick response are being put in place.
Thank you so much, Dr. Juliet Otto, a clinical psychologist at the Lagos University Teaching Hospital, for speaking with us this morning.
It's a pleasure.
Officials in the Russian-occupied city of Enerda in southeastern Ukraine have started handing out Russian passports to local residents. 25 residents living in the city have already received passports after President Vladimir Putin signed a decree in July giving all citizens of Ukraine a simplified way to obtain citizenship. That's Russian citizenship. The city is located in Ukraine's southeastern Zaporizhzhia region. It was captured by Russian forces in the first weeks of Moscow's special military operation in Ukraine. The region's Russian-installed authorities have floated the idea of holding a referendum on joining Russia, a move the Ukraine has called illegal. Russia and its proxies have seized the majority of Zaporizhzhia region along Ukraine's southern coast, but Ukraine's military still controls the northern part, including the city of Zaporizhzhia, the largest urban center and home to more than half of the region's pre-war population. Meanwhile, NATO forces from 19 countries were in Grafenau in Germany on Wednesday for a multinational artillery exercise. According to the organizers, around 2,400 troops from the United States, the UK, and across Europe took part in the dynamic front exercises aiming to increase readiness, lethality, and interoperability in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The exercises included some weapons systems deployed in the Ukraine conflict, including the US-made M270 multiple launch rocket system. Ukraine said on July 15 that the first M270 systems had arrived in the country, but did not specify which country had donated them. The dynamic front 22 exercises run from July 6th to 24th in the Grafenau training area in southern Germany. Organizers say the drills would involve 55 weapon systems, 1,186 projectiles, and some 240 rockets.
I think that everybody understands what's happening not far from here. And, I think what this brings to light is the fact that the NATO alliance is rock solid, and we've never had a doubt of that. But it's coming together to train in a very real way to be able to fire live munition in a kinetic way with Air Force, with cyber, with electronic warfare, with artillery. I think everybody feels that what we're doing is very important at this time. What we experienced in Iraq and Afghanistan was the tailoring of a force to the threat that we faced at that time. And clearly, as we look at what's happening to our east, we see artillery on both sides of the Russia-Ukraine conflict playing a pivotal role. So all the more important now that we take this exercise that we've been doing for years and grow it to a point that we are technically and tactically compatible with one another, that we're personally and professionally compatible with one another, and that we achieve that interoperability amongst the different members of the alliance.
Now, Austria's Foreign Minister Alexander Schallenberg and his Czech Republic counterpart Jan Lipavsky have met with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv. Both ministers also visited the Antonov aviation plant in the settlement of Hostomel outside of Kyiv, which was heavily damaged during fighting in the early days of the war. Zelensky, in his nightly address, discussed the issue of increasing pressure on Russia for the war and additional support for Ukraine during a meeting with the foreign ministers. He also thanked both countries for the assistance already provided and outlined the needs for the near future. Now I have joining me a former medical student at Zaporizhzhia State Medical University. She's a returnee, I believe, Fatima Bello. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I know it's pretty early. So can we call you doctor now? You have graduated, right?
Yes, I have.
Well, congratulations. And
thank you very much.
Yeah, so we heard some time ago that the Nigerian Medical Association was refusing to admit those who studied medical courses in Ukraine into the association. What's the situation now?
Honestly, there is nothing. If I'm being honest, there is nothing. The truth is that medicine is a 6-year course, but becoming a doctor is a continuous process of learning. Unfortunately, MDCN is emphasizing on the 3 months that we spent online, which is unfair, which is sad, because this can easily be compensated. We have what we call the house job. House job is supposed to be a 1-year training program. It's very easy for you to add this 3 months to compensate for the 3 months that we spent online, because that is what they are emphasizing on. And I just believe that this is not fair. And we are begging and we are pleading that they give us the opportunity to write the license exam and support and contribute to our society.
So what are you doing in the meantime, while you're imploring on the association to reconsider, the education that you've had even before you left Ukraine and, completing your education online? What are you doing in the meantime?
All right, personally, I am studying hard because I want to be the best doctor that I can be. So right now I am studying hard, but hoping that these people would reverse their stance. And like I said, give us the opportunity to share our knowledge. We have gathered knowledge for 5 years and 9 months. We cannot throw that into the bin. It is impossible. So we are hoping. So in the moment I am studying hard and hoping that by November, I will be able to write the license exam in my home country and be given the opportunity to practice and to be the best doctor that I can be for my society. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's quite appreciable, right? Because there are others just like yourself who are going through the same thing. How do they feel about what's going on?
Honestly, it took everyone by surprise. No one expected this because a lot of people were affected by the war, and we hoped that our country would be more supportive. So everyone is still I would say still in shock, but most importantly, hoping that all of this is reversed and everything goes out well as it has always been. So yeah.
What official avenues are you exploring, to implore, on the authorities to make sure that, you are accepted in Nigeria as doctors, you're absorbed into the system?
Okay, so I remember when the statement was put out, we created a group page on WhatsApp currently. So a lot of people are trying to, we are trying to gather people. We've gone to the House of Rep. We've gone to people to help us to talk to people in the government, just basically people that can help and support this movement. So right now we have a group page. We talk every day. We try to bring out different ideas, but unfortunately, we don't have a listening ear as of right now. We don't have a listening ear, so we are just trying to push as much as we can because this situation is just really unfair. It's really, really unfair.
Yeah, and our hearts go out to you. You all could have been, really splendid medical doctors just helping out, and the country currently needs, your services. Thankfully, you are safe. You're back in Nigeria. You are safe. But as you hear, developments going on in Ukraine, and you're hearing about Russia bombarding more cities and more territories, how does that make you feel?
I am sad. I am really sad because to an extent, I am done with Ukraine. But I want to look back and think of the people from first year to fifth year. It's really sad because no one knows where to go, because right now the Nigerian government are talking about the integration, which is almost impossible. Integration takes years and years. So I really feel sad for everyone that is still in school and hoping that their dreams are not crushed because of the war. So please, we're just begging the Nigerian government to just please support us. It's possible that we can be integrated into hospitals, gain clinical experience. In the process, we are still learning online and hoping that everything is good, so that hopefully we can go back to Ukraine and complete. They can go back to Ukraine and complete their education. So yeah.
You're hoping to go back to Ukraine, or some of you are hoping to go back to Ukraine?
So the other students, I don't have to go back to Ukraine, but I'm looking out for the other people because I have a lot of friends. There are a lot of Nigerians in my school. Personally, there are a lot of Nigerians in my school. So I'm hoping that they can go back and complete their education and fulfill their dreams of becoming medical doctors.
And how many of them, really came back? Because I know that a lot of them also, transferred to schools in other parts of Europe, some refusing to come back home. What are you hearing about, how their own progress has come?
In terms of transferring to schools, I don't think that is entirely true, because the Ukrainian governments are still hoping that these students can return back. So in this case, they are not really giving out, unfortunately, they are not really giving out the transcript for transfer of schools. So we're just hoping, everything is just here and there, but we are just hoping that everything goes back to normal and everyone is satisfied and everyone is able to get the education that we really, really wanted to get. So. Yeah.
So your school is still continuing education online. Zaporizhzhia State Medical University, that hasn't been touched yet by the Russian invasion, by the war. Your school is still standing, right?
Yes, it is still standing.
And your lecturers are fine?
Yes, it is assumed right now that the academic year is over, so everyone is just trying to think of the whole thing, trying to settle and trying to think of the next move, because usually class is supposed to start September. So this is just like a break period, just to get everything right and think of the future. So.
It's a really long break, and thankfully this particular city where your school is located hasn't come up in the news yet as having hit by Russian missiles. Fatima, thank you so much for speaking with us. We wish you all the best.
Thank you for having me.
We're hoping you get absorbed and you can practice and become the best doctor that Nigeria needs at this time.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
Russia's central bank will allow banks from designated unfriendly countries to trade between foreign currencies on the Russian forex markets. Moscow is labeling countries it hit with sanctions as unfriendly, a list that includes the entire European Union, the United States, the United Kingdom, Japan, Australia, and others. A central bank says that easing controls would support foreign economic activity and create the conditions for building new supply chains. Now, as you heard in our headlines, President Vladimir Putin says it's not clear in what condition the Nord Stream 1 turbine will be returned after repairs in Canada. He's also saying that there is a risk that equipment could be switched off and the Nord Stream 1 could stop after it has been returned from Canada. Kremlin-controlled energy giant Gazprom cut gas exports to Europe via the route to 40% capacity in June, blaming delays in the return of a turbine that Siemens Energy was servicing in Canada.
Сейчас вот говорят, вернут эти машины. Одну, во всяком случае, вернут. Но в каком качестве вернут?
Now, Canada says they will return these machines, Nord Stream 1 Siemens gas turbines. At least one of them will be returned. But in what condition will they be returned? What will the technical parameters be after the planned repair has been completed? Maybe the special presidential representative for digital and technological development, Dmitry Peskov, correctly said they will go ahead and turn it all off at some point. And that's it. And Nord Stream 1 will stop because they came from there, from Canada. It really is a matter of great importance. We need our own engineering schools.
And to some cheery news now, as natural gas begins flowing through a major pipeline from Russia to Europe after a 10-day shutdown for maintenance, according to data from the operator's website, the gas flow is expected to fall well short of full capacity. A Nord Stream 1 pipeline to Germany had been closed since July 11th for annual maintenance work. German officials had feared the pipeline, the country's main source of Russian gas, which has accounted for about a third of Germany's gas supplies, might not reopen at all. Operator Nord Stream AG said gas started flowing again this morning, but the flow would take a while to ramp up. Nord Stream also said a similar amount of gas is expected to that seen before maintenance. But the head of Germany's network regulator says that Gazprom, had notified deliveries today of only about 30% of the pipeline's capacity. Well, that takes us to our discussion on the world, on business, how this war has affected everything else, the economy and so on. But it's good news, Laddie.
Yeah.
Williams, my colleague, who is here. It's good news, isn't it, that the Nord Stream 1 is finally reopened,
yes.
And Europe, the rest of Europe, which did apply, can begin to receive gas.
Exactly, because at this point now Europe can, breathe a sigh of relief, because analysts were expecting that, the multiple scenarios could actually play out. Maybe Russia could say, you know what, we cannot, supply gas at this point and still turn off, the taps to Europe. And that would have impacted, the markets. It would have impacted, how we're seeing the industries there, the manufacturing industry already, bracing for the worst case scenario. And if the gas is actually turned off at this point, it's going to impact the whole European economy. And analysts were already expecting that the recession, the risk of recession, that's already permeating all through Europe. That would have fast-tracked the recession that they were seeing in the horizon. So it's a good thing that they've opened the taps finally, but there are still concerns at this point, because we know how
30% capacity.
30% capacity is still
lot,
is not going to cut it, but it's something. And we know how they're already suffering a heat wave in most parts of Europe, which is also increasing demand for gas at this point, because now it takes more for cooling. You need more gas for cooling at this point. And we also see most of these industries already trying to see how they can ration what they have, see how they can reduce consumption at this point. But with this heat wave we're seeing right now, it's not allowing them do that. And
well, they're advising people to do the rationing. Governments can only do so much, I guess.
They can only do so much.
They can only do so much. So Russian consumer prices dipped this week. You would understand that because you've been monitoring that. It's quite interesting because this is happening as global prices are going up.
Exactly. Yeah, we're seeing Russian economy go the other way. We're seeing prices rise globally at this point. We're seeing major central bankers battling inflation. But we're seeing in Russia, it's a different case. And it's mostly because of the capital controls they put in place when all the sanctions were heaped on them. We saw them reduce how much money was going out of the country, talking about foreign exchange. They also made sure that whatever was sold by the exporters, was kept, within the economy. And we've seen the central banker of Russia being praised, for, most of those tactics she used, to keep the Russian economy afloat. But we're seeing that actually, play out right now with prices actually going down in Russia. But that's because we're seeing consumer demand actually reducing at this point in Russia, because they're not getting that much commodities into the country. Talking about imports, they're not getting much imports at this point because of the sanctions. But they're still, getting most of their exports out, looking at, gas and oil and, other commodities. But at the end of the day, what's helping this now, we're seeing the ruble actually strengthen, at this point, because of, they've released some of the capital controls they put in place to actually, strengthen the ruble and the economy. So now the ruble is strengthening, consumer demand is weighing at this point.
Right.
Seeing, and that's also pushing back, their consumer price index, which is helping them reining inflation. But it's still not at the target. Their target for inflation is about 4%. It's still way, above their target at this point. So tomorrow they're meeting, the central bank and the monetary policy committee. They're meeting tomorrow. So analysts are expecting them to cut rates, at this point, since they're already seeing, inflation taper. We see what other central bankers are doing. They're looking at hiking rates, at this point because of rising inflation.
Like the Nigerian central bank.
Exactly, just like Nigeria.
But oil prices fell today for a second straight session. Is the oil bull market over? And could that also be, the reason why there seems to be a dollar shortage in Nigeria?
Well, looking at the oil market at this point, we've seen a ping-pong movement in that market. Today is up, tomorrow it's down. It's either supply concerns or demand concerns. And right now we're seeing, demand concerns with, rising inflation and that risk of recession. So at the end of the day, we're seeing the traders actually, sentiment trade, at this point. They're looking at, what's happening with Russia, what's happening with the risk of recession, globally. And we're seeing that play into prices. We're seeing prices come down in the oil market at this point. And at the end of the day, Nigeria is still not, taking advantage of these prices because we're not meeting up with our quota, talking about our exports of oil at this point.
And whose fault is that we're not meeting our quota?
Well, it's a myriad of factors at this point.
You
Number
really
one,
can't say that on TV.
we're seeing oil thefts at record highs at this point. There's just so much going on. With our oil industry at this point, we're not getting out the amount of oil we need to take advantage of this price. But we've seen, the NNPC actually transition into a private company at this point. So people are hoping maybe it might be the next Aramco at some point. Hopefully.
Yeah, but speaking about the NNPC, the transition, is it really to NNPC's benefit? Or is it really to the benefit of the oil market?
Well, at the end of the day, it's supposed to, benefit, Nigeria, as an oil producer. We're supposed to be able to, have a company that's, selling the oil, getting all of that oil out at this point and, making sure that the theft that we're seeing is not as, is reduced or eliminated at this point. We're seeing how Aramco is doing so well, with Saudi Arabia.
Despite the attacks,
they're reaping the benefits. The shareholders of the company are smiling to the bank at this point. So we would like to see that replicated with NNPC, but they do have, a lot of hurdles to cross at this point, and we're hoping.
Right. Ladi, just before you go, I'm going to touch on one of your favorite subjects, which is the markets.
Yeah, the markets. The markets, they're not looking so bad this morning. We saw the U.S. market actually close in the green, seeing most of the earnings, coming out from most of these corporates, and they're looking good. Some are not, up to expectation, but we're seeing that drive the market. But the futures this morning are looking, down at this point, talking about the Dow Jones Industrial Futures and the S&P and the NASDAQ. Bitcoin not looking so good this morning. Is red because we got that news yesterday that Elon Musk, as Tesla, sold about 70% of their Bitcoin holdings. So we saw that impact the market. So Bitcoin dropped there. And back here in Nigeria, we saw our own NGX, the equities market actually dropped yesterday about 0.2%. And, that's all happening, after the recent rate hikes. And we know how equities markets don't like rate hikes, at this point.
It sounds like we need a different show to discuss Elon Musk's and his escapades. His escapades. Thank you so much, Ladi. Real pleasure having you here.
Yep.
And when we come back after the break, families of Americans detained abroad unveil mural of loved ones calling on the country not to forget them. Stay with us.
Stay connected to the world with Channels TV Podcast and get all the trending stories. Simply log on to channelstv.com, click on podcast, select the program of your choice, and listen. Our podcast is available on Apple, Google, and Spotify. Tap the expertise you trust. Touch the stories that touch you. Anytime, anywhere.
Like drops of rain, individuals and groups innovate, birthing ideas that might make the difference in the conversations, and action to fight climate change and the negative impact of man's activities. Innovative thinking from Africa and Europe to save our planet, to light up our cities without tearing apart the ozone, making progress safe and sustainable. On Eco Africa, we highlight the efforts to live and grow sustainably at these times on Channels Television.
Welcome back. The U.S. Deputy Treasury Secretary Wale Adeyemo says the United States hopes to see a global price cap on Russian oil introduced by December. Speaking to the Aspen Security Forum in Colorado, he said, "We're following on what the Europeans have done." They introduced the idea of looking to a price cap, but they also said by December they plan to put in place their insurance ban. According to him, the goal is to make sure that insurance ban is going into place and can also allow Russian energy to flow into the market. Restaurants in Malaysia are grappling with sharp rises in essential commodities, including flour and cooking oil, over the past months, as the ongoing conflict has driven up prices of wheat imports, among other goods. Malaysia has two main staples, namely roti canai, a fried Indian bread, and mee goreng, fried noodles, with both relying on imported wheat. However, due to the rising cost of wheat, some restaurants have no choice but to increase the prices of the products. Currently, Malaysia's biggest source of wheat is Australia, and about 1/5 of its wheat supply comes from Ukraine. During a recent trip to Turkey, Malaysia's Prime Minister said his country is keen to buy more wheat and wheat products from Turkey as it seeks to diversify its suppliers.
From January until July, the cost has increased nearly to 44% in the flour. And at the moment, we have only increased 10% price of our roti canai starting of July. We don't want to pass the cost directly to the customer. We want to absorb most of it. I really hope that prices of flour reduces in the future as well. And we will definitely revise our pricing lower if the cost reduces in the future as well.
Malaysia imports like 60% of our food supply, as we heard so much of during the pandemic. So I think if we think about this as a more global food crisis setting, that's something that will spark policymakers to really think about long-term planning, long-term diversification.
A 13-year-old boy was killed by a Russian missile strike as he waited for a bus near a mosque in the eastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv on Wednesday. After the attack, the teenager's father knelt holding the hand of his dead son, whose body lay on the street near the destroyed bus shelter. Rescue workers carried away another corpse on a stretcher. The nearby mosque had been badly damaged. Oleh Snubov, the governor of the Kharkiv region, said 3 people had been killed in Kharkiv on Wednesday. The teenager, a man and a woman, but it was not clear whether all 3 died at the bus stop. He said the dead teenager's 15-year-old sister had also been wounded, but did not give their names. Now, morale displaying the faces of 18 Americans detained overseas, including United States basketball star Brittany Griner, who's been jailed in Russia since February on drug charges, has been installed on the side of a building in a narrow alley in the Georgetown neighborhood, just a 10-minute drive west of the White House in Washington, D.C. The opening of the mural is the latest act of public advocacy by the families of detainees who have in recent months significantly stepped up their calls to U.S. President Joe Biden to personally intervene to bring their loved ones home. The U.S. does not provide an official figure for how many of its citizens are detained abroad, but the James W. Foley Legacy Foundation, named after an American journalist abducted and killed in Syria, says that more than 60 Americans are wrongfully detained in about 18 countries. Some are held by top U.S. adversaries such as Iran, Russia, and Venezuela. A key question many families raised at the event was whether any of the detainees would be able to reunite with their families by the time the morale starts to fade out.
Definitely, Brittany's case has helped bring attention to the rest of our cases, and I think that's the whole point of this campaign, is lifting each other up through all of our voices. We all have different sources and resources, and if we can bring each other together, I mean, I feel horribly that this is happening to Brittany's family. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, and I hope she's home as soon as possible, and that she could continue to advocate for the rest of us, and we could continue to advocate for her as well.
It feels much, much closer than any family, because nobody else feels what we are going through like the other families. So yes, whoever wants to be involved is welcome, and we are just a source of support for each other like nobody else can be for us.
To be with the family members and to help them put the last portion of their son's hat on the mural, or to line up the smile so it's just right. Yeah. It's very meaningful, it's very powerful, and I think that you can see, you don't need to know the stories behind the photos to know just how much they mean to these family members.
Brittany Griner, held hostage in Russia. Imad Shargi, wrongfully detained in Iran. Luke Denman, wrongfully detained in Venezuela.
I have graduated medical school. I have gotten the residency of my dreams. I have had my dad's 2 grandchildren who are 3 and 1. And how much more time are all of these people going to miss with their families?
The acting president of Ukraine's Track and Field Federation, Yevhen Pronin, said he experienced something remarkable. A group of Americans tried to buy him a lunch on his first day at the World Athletics Championships. Ukrainian athletes and officials say they feel at home in Eugene, Oregon, where they can spot their flag around the quiet college town. While cheers of USA echo through Haywood Field as the U.S. men swept the 100 meters podium, another sentiment is well represented among the host crowd. Pronin, who is a soldier in the Ukrainian army and spent 4 months in the front lines before traveling to the World Championships, said that there are a lot of Ukrainian flags in the windows of Eugene, but it's not Ukrainians. Pronin, who plans to return to the front line for 3 weeks before traveling to the European Championships, said this is the smallest delegation the country has ever sent, with just 22 athletes. High jumper Yaroslava Mahuchik, who collected her 2nd straight silver in Tuesday's final, was forced to flee her home in Dnipro after the invasion. She and her teammate Irina Gerashenko, who finished 4th, enjoyed broad support among the home fans. Competing in her 5th Worlds and the 400 meters hurdles, Ukrainian Anna Ryskova said she has received encouragement outside the stadium as well.
For sure, I'm very happy that I have this medal, because every medal now it's for Ukrainian people, for my country. And I always now say that I want to give our people a smiling and warm inside, and I hope that I'm done with this. I get a medal.
Oh God, it was the first day when we come to this place. In the first floor, it's like a place where students have lunch. And we just come with our general secretary, and I think 6 or 5 persons come to us and ask, can we pay for your lunch? And I don't understand what's happened. And after that, somebody tell me that it's support, it's normal. We can see that a lot of people who are Americans with some things of Ukrainian flags, for example, with a bracelet, with the things, with a little flag on the back, and it's great support. And I want to stop everyone and say thank you. I'm from Ukraine. Thank you very much for your support, because you can see that a lot of Ukrainian flags in the windows in Eugene, but it's not Ukrainians. Understand? It's not a person from our team, and that's why it's. I think it's the biggest support in all of the world, because I don't know the country. I don't talk about Russia and Belarus. I don't know the country who did not support Ukraine. And of course, when we hear on the stadium before the fields, before the attempts, the name of our athletes, I think that I stay not in America, I stay in Ukraine, because we have some loud public, like 2 Americans and 2 Ukrainians, only for 2 nations. It's really interesting, and I'm happy. I'm happy to be here and hear it.
While much attention has been focused on the destruction of property and killing of people in the Russian war in Ukraine, 68-year-old Natalia Pasnek has been focusing her attention on the animals, the cats and kittens to be specific. Every morning since the war started, she's been making the rounds through her bombed-out buildings in her neighborhood in northeastern Ukraine, bringing food for cats, many of them abandoned by families. She estimates there are up to 100 cats and kittens in the vicinity of her building in northern Saltivka, which had been home to about 300,000 people before the invasion. Some of the cats she visits belong to families who asked for help. Others are in abandoned and destroyed buildings. So for the cat food she brings, she has been doing odd jobs, mending clothes on the side, and asking for help from volunteers and relatives. Pasternak, who's the only person left in her building, does not just take care of other people's cats, she does live in the basement with about a dozen of them who keep her company. I've heard they're one of the best emotional animals to have around. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.